At 4:30 on the coldest morning of January, Evelyn Mercer looked through her kitchen window, and froze. The neighbor everyone called unfriendly was standing on her front steps with a shovel. He had already cleared the snow from her walkway. Evelyn reached for the porch light, but before she could turn it on, the old man picked up his shovel and disappeared toward the next house. If quiet stories about ordinary kindness mean something to you, stay with me, and consider subscribing for more stories like this. Evelyn Mercer was 69 when she moved into the little gray house on Willow Lane. She told people she chose the neighborhood because it was quiet. But that was only part of the truth. Quiet had become easier for her. Her husband Daniel had died a little over a year earlier. They had spent nearly 40 years together. They shared breakfasts, errands, television programs, and small disagreements about things that no longer seemed important. Now, Evelyn lived in a house filled with silence. Her daughter lived several hours away. They spoke often, but Evelyn hated the idea of becoming someone her daughter worried about every day. So whenever her daughter asked how she was doing, Evelyn gave the same answer. "I'm fine." She unpacked her dishes, she hung curtains, she placed 2 chairs on the front porch, even though only one of them was ever used, and little by little, she learned the names of the people on Willow Lane. Everyone except the man next door. His name was Arthur Hale. He was in his mid-70s. He lived alone in a narrow brick house, with an old wooden shed behind it. Every morning, Arthur came outside just after sunrise. He checked his mailbox. He swept his steps. Sometimes, he worked quietly in the shed, and if someone waved at him, he usually gave them a short nod. That was about it. The first time Evelyn tried to introduce herself, she found him repairing a loose board on his fence. "Good morning," she called. "I'm Evelyn. I just moved in next door." Arthur looked up. "Morning." Evelyn waited. Arthur went back to the fence. She smiled awkwardly. "Well, I suppose we'll be seeing a lot of each other." Arthur tapped the board into place. "Probably." And that was the entire conversation. Evelyn went back inside, thinking the same thing several neighbors had already told her. Arthur Hale was not a people person. But there were things about Arthur that people did not notice. They noticed that he never attended the summer barbecue. But they did not notice that the next morning, every folding table had somehow been stacked neatly beside the community hall. They noticed that he rarely stopped to chat. But they did not notice that when a young father across the street struggled with a broken gate, a small bag appeared beside it. Inside were exactly the screws he needed. Nobody saw Arthur leave them there. Then autumn came, and people noticed something else. Inside Arthur's shed, 4 snow shovels hung on the wall, different sizes. Beside them were 2 bags of sidewalk salt and an old metal container filled with sand. One neighbor laughed, preparing for the end of the world. Arthur closed the shed door. Preparing for January, people laughed. Arthur did not. By December, Evelyn had decided that perhaps some people simply preferred to be left alone. She understood that better than most, so she stopped trying to make conversation. Then came the first heavy snow. Evelyn woke the next morning, and found her walkway already cleared. She assumed the town crew had done it. A week later, it happened again. Snow covered every car, every rooftop, every lawn on Willow Lane. But there was a clean path from Evelyn's front door all the way to the sidewalk. She mentioned it to the woman across the street. "Someone did mine too," the woman said. Neither of them knew who. Then January brought the biggest snowfall of the season. That night, thick flakes covered the street. Evelyn looked outside before going to bed. She decided she would wait until afternoon to clear the steps. There was nowhere she needed to go. The snow could wait, but years of waking early with Daniel had left her with an old habit. At 4:30 the next morning, Evelyn opened her eyes. She went downstairs, she filled the kettle, and while she waited for the water to warm, she looked through the kitchen window. That was when she saw Arthur. He was standing in her yard, shoveling snow. At first, Evelyn almost knocked on the glass, but something made her stop. Arthur cleared the last section of her walkway, then, he sprinkled a small amount of salt on the 2 steps nearest the porch. After that, he picked up his shovel and walked toward the house across the street. Evelyn watched him clear that walkway too. Then, he went 3 houses down. That was where 81-year-old Harold Finch lived alone. Arthur cleared Harold's front steps, then the path to his mailbox, then he moved on again. Evelyn forgot about her tea. She stood at the window, watching him. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Arthur never knocked on a door. He never left a note. He never waited for anyone to thank him. He simply worked his way down Willow Lane, while everyone else slept. Finally, Evelyn put on her coat, then her boots, and stepped outside. Arthur was halfway through another driveway when he noticed her. He stopped. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. "You've been doing this," Evelyn said. Arthur looked down at the shovel. "Doing what?" "Our walks." Arthur shrugged. "Snow has to go somewhere." Evelyn looked down the street. "All winter?" "Most winters." "For everyone?" Arthur shook his head. "Not everyone." He pointed toward several houses. "Just the people who might have a harder time with it." Evelyn followed his gaze. Her house, Harold's house, the little bungalow belonging to a woman who walked with a cane, and the house of a father who often left for work before sunrise. Arthur had not been clearing snow randomly, he had been choosing houses. "How long have you done this?" Evelyn asked. Arthur became quiet, then he looked toward his own dark house. "My wife started it." It was the first time Evelyn had ever heard him mention her. "Her name was Margaret," Arthur continued. "There was a woman 2 doors down from us years ago. She couldn't manage her steps one winter. Margaret cleared them. Next snow she did it again." A small smile appeared on Arthur's face. "Then she kept adding houses." Evelyn smiled. "And you helped her?" Arthur nodded. "She was better at talking, I was better with the shovel." Evelyn hesitated. "What happened to Margaret?" Arthur looked down. "She died." There was no long explanation, no dramatic speech, just 2 quiet words, from a man who had apparently spent years avoiding the subject. Evelyn understood those words, better than he could have known. "I'm sorry," she said. Arthur nodded. "So am I." Evelyn looked toward the houses down the street. "Then why keep doing it?" Arthur looked at Willow Lane. Fresh snow covered the roofs. A porch light came on at the far end of the street. Arthur watched it for a moment, then he said, "Because she would have." Evelyn felt something tighten in her throat. For months, she had mistaken Arthur's silence for coldness. But standing there in the snow, she finally understood. Arthur was grieving too. He simply spoke a different language. Some people used words. Arthur Hale used a shovel at 4:30 in the morning. Evelyn noticed another shovel leaning against his wheelbarrow. She reached for it. Arthur frowned. "What are you doing? Helping? You should go inside." "No, it's cold." Evelyn looked at him. "I noticed." Arthur stared at her for a few seconds. Then, for perhaps the first time since she had moved next door, he laughed. It was a small laugh. But it was enough. He handed her the shovel. "Start by the mailbox, by sunrise." 2 more neighbors had noticed them. The next time snow fell, there were 4 people outside before 6. Arthur did not seem pleased about this. At least, that was what he claimed. "You're all making this complicated," he muttered. As someone handed him a cup of coffee, but he drank the coffee. Over the next few weeks, Willow Lane began to change, not in a dramatic way. Nobody held a meeting. Nobody created a club. Nobody made Arthur give a speech. People simply started paying attention. One neighbor cleared the walkway outside Harold's house. Another helped carry groceries from a car to a front porch. Evelyn began leaving an extra cup of coffee on the small table between her house and Arthur's. She never knocked. Sometimes, the cup remained there for an hour. Sometimes, when she looked again, it was empty. One Saturday morning, Arthur appeared at her door holding the cup. "You use too much sugar," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "That coffee was for me." Arthur looked at the cup. "Then you use too much sugar." Evelyn laughed. She laughed so hard. Arthur almost smiled. Almost. By February, people on Willow Lane had stopped describing Arthur as rude. They learned that he remembered which houses needed extra salt on the steps. He knew which porch rail was loose. He knew which neighbor worked the earliest shift. He even knew where the snow tended to pile up when the wind came from the north. And still, he never asked for thanks. One afternoon, Evelyn found him repairing the handle of one of his old shovels. She sat beside him in the shed. On the wall was a faded photograph. Arthur stood in deep snow beside a woman. Both of them were holding shovels. The woman was laughing. "That Margaret?" Evelyn asked. Arthur nodded. "She looks happy." She usually was. Evelyn studied the picture, then she smiled softly. "Daniel hated snow." Arthur looked at her. "Your husband?" "Yes." She nodded. "He complained about it every year." Arthur waited. Evelyn looked down. "I'd give almost anything to hear him complain about it one more time." Arthur said nothing. He did not try to fix her sadness. He did not tell her everything happened for a reason. He did not tell her she needed to move on. He simply sat beside her. After a while, Arthur spoke. "Margaret sang while she shoveled." Evelyn looked at him. "Was she good?" Arthur shook his head. "Terrible." Evelyn laughed. Arthur laughed too. Outside, Snow had started falling again. Arthur looked through the shed window. "Tomorrow morning," he said. Evelyn stood. 4:30, Arthur shook his head. 5. Evelyn smiled. "You're getting soft." Arthur looked at her. "Don't tell anyone." That winter, Arthur still avoided most neighborhood dinners, he still answered many questions, with fewer words than necessary. He still preferred his shed to a crowded living room, but people no longer confused quietness with cruelty, and Arthur no longer had to clear Willow Lane by himself. Sometimes, the kindest person on the street is not the one who says. Sometimes, it is the person who quietly notices. What needs to be done? If this story stayed with you, kindness lives here. And if someone once helped you in a quiet way, a way you never forgot, share that memory too, because someone reading the comments today may need the reminder that small kindnesses are rarely as small as they seem.